Hi, everyone. It is Wednesday. It is March 30th, and I'm Susan Moore, Community Engagement Manager here at IIBA.
And I'm Scott Bennett. I'm the Manager of Business Analysis here at the International Institute of Business Analysis. And today our topic is, where does business analysis fit in Agile? We've got a guest with us today, and why don't I hand it over to you, Susan? You can introduce Ryland.
So Ryland Leyton, he is an author. He is a speaker. He's like a BA every day. Hashtag. Um, um, and so we're excited to have him because he regularly speaks on not just Agile topics, but also business analysis topics. And he spoke on this topic in January, and we had a lot of feedback. So we wanted to have Ryland come on and talk some more about it. Also to show off his handy skills. That beautiful statement wall is a product of his hard work as well. So Ryland, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Right. So I don't know that I can even add to that introduction. It's one of the nicer ones I've had, so thank you. So yes, I'm Ryland Leyton. I'm a senior business analyst and agile coach at the Cognizant Microsoft Business Group. So if you're one of our famous clients, it's great to have you on the session today. And I am happy to get the chance to talk about this with folks. And kind of like Susan was saying, the thing I get brought in for on these things is I'm a BA. I do it every day. I love helping others get it. I love helping other people have that aha moment where they learn something new, which is one reason I do a lot of education and training and some of the books I've written. And looking forward to any part of that I can bring from that real world, everyday stuff that I live to this conversation today. I'm happy to be doing.
That's great. And Ryan, thank you for joining us today. For our guests that are on LinkedIn Live, this is all about an interactive session. We are actually live right now. So we're taking your questions. So if you've got questions for us around Agile, please ask them. And we'll get Ryland's expertise on this. So I'm really excited about this, Ryland. I haven't myself participated in a lot of Agile projects. And my role is a manager of business analysis. So my first question for you is, as a manager helping people through this, what type of advice would you give managers on how to support your team in doing Agile work?
So it's an interesting question. I think there's two things that come to mind. One, as the manager, is to remind people that as a BA, you are all throughout, if I'm going to use Scrum as a simple thing because people are so familiar with Scrum, you are all throughout the life cycle. Interestingly, you're not so much in the sprint itself unless someone needs you. Because for a sprint to start successfully, your work that you are preparing for the team, like if you're preparing user stories or whatever your artifact of choice is, the team is going to work from, that has to be ready the day they start. A thing we were talking about in our sort of green room before this, folks, was some folks get this idea that, well, if we're going to do a story in a sprint, that includes all the analysis work getting done in that sprint also. And that almost never works. Typically, you have to do a lot of analysis work to get it ready for the team. And adding that into a 2-week cycle for a typical sprint length, if you're doing sprint type stuff, it doesn't work. So the thing I always tell BAs, and I would encourage BA managers to tell their folks, is the top job you have as a BA in an agile world is making sure that sprint launches on time with high quality stories that the team can use and complete easily and don't get rejected and so forth. Like 90+% of the work you bring to the estimation session and the sprint planning session, if that's the way you're working, the team should look at it, say, yeah, that makes sense, and be able to work it through. Take it into the sprint and go on. And then in the sprint, they're asking you to validate the work that's been done sometimes, like look at it, or they ask you a question here or there. But otherwise, you're focused on that next sprint. You just launched a sprint successfully. You got a 2-week clock running until the next one launches. You got to be ready for that. That's your whole focus. If you can't do that in an agile world, you're not going to be a successful BA.
Okay, that's great. That's really helpful.
And I think this is one of the most frustrating myths, having been both a leader of BAs and having been one of those BAs on an Agile project. It is one of the most frustrating myths that, no, we're just going to do all of that. And, you will never get your user story to done if you start analysis in the same sprint. So in some ways, so you said work ahead, and I think there is an automatic interpretation of, oh, but you mean we'll have to work waterfall? And I would disagree with that use of the word waterfall. You do need to work ahead. You need to iterate with some frequency, and you should plan for that requirements work and when you think you're going to have it delivered. When you came and talked with us in January, which by the way, we've got that, if you're a member, we've got the recording on our website in our archive so people can see all of this. But you talked about having a good definition of ready. So we always talk about those user stories having definition of done, which is what is it going to take to deliver it. You talked about definition of ready. Can you give us your definition of ready?
Sure. I think those are really, really helpful things because, so definition of done is after I've gotten the work, at what point do I declare it's done, right? That's what a definition of done is. And usually that's for the development team. A definition of ready is where you take something in the world and you say, this thing is ready for the next thing when I have done this. It's a little bit of a different definition. It's still sort of a definition of done, but we're using it to mean it's not that I've completed something, it's that I have gotten something to a state that the next person in the chain can use it. So I like to say a definition of ready to estimate a story, a very common thing for BAs to live with, is that the BA says this story is good, it's solid, it meets the invest criteria. That the technical partner, which might be the tech lead or a developer you work with, whoever it is, has looked over that story and said, yeah, we could make that story happen. I agree with you. That is from a technical viewpoint, you have specified enough and I get the point of the story and I have at least one way to build this because it might be somebody else building it. So there's at least one way to do the thing you've said and you answered all the questions. The ACs are good. In some cases, depending on the world I happen to be working at that minute, sometimes the product owner will look at the story also and say, yes, that's the thing I actually want. That represents me correctly. Because the BA, I'm kind of working on their behalf as their proxy in some ways. But sometimes, frequently, I just have worked on it with them initially, and I may or may not show them the story directly. But often I do. They can always see it. At that point, right, I've written a thing I think is valuable and small and testable, and now the team partner has told me, yep, that's estimatable. We can do that, and then it's ready to estimate. Once it's been estimated, then it is ready to play and could be drawn into a backlog. So I often encourage BAs to maybe add these three statuses to their DevOps or Jira or whatever you're using, something like in analysis, which just means I'm working on it at the moment. When I'm bringing it to the table, that's open to debate, but I'm working this story actively, working to analyze it, and then ready to estimate, and then ready to play. Because my Scrum Master, who's my key partner, right? One of my key partners, they should start to see things tick over into that ready to estimate state by sprint planning, right? If they see a whole bunch of stuff in analysis, but not in ready to estimate, they might reasonably call me and say, are you going to bring, we got 10 stories for next sprint. 3 of them say ready to estimate, and we're doing estimation tomorrow. You good? And it's like, yeah, I'm actually fine. I've got a meeting with our technical partner this afternoon. We just couldn't find time. Yeah. So it lets that transparency and accountability come in, which makes everybody a lot happier, right? If you think about Agile, right? We're all being transparent with each other. We're doing stand-up. We're talking about blocks. I'm probably not talking about my analysis work so much in stand-up, except to say to somebody, hey, by the way, Dave, I really need you today as my tech partner. I've got a stack of stories that I need to clear out. So I really need to see you sometime today. It's an example. Does that help?
It does. Yeah, it does. And I think for those BAs that are listening today, I think understanding that their milestone is ready as opposed to done. And that maybe can help them a little bit with the conversations with, if there's IT leaders or other team members that don't understand, no, we can't do the requirements in the sprint. We have to do it ahead. Yeah. They can have that conversation of, I'll make this transparent to you. You'll know what's coming. But this work can't happen in the same sprint that you guys intend to deliver it. We do have a couple of questions. Okay. Why don't we take a couple of those? Okay. So I think this is a standard question that we get a lot. What are the main tools that an Agile BA should know? We do get a lot of questions about what tools in. Ryland, I don't know if you think in terms of like software as tools, or if there might be other things that you define as the tools of the Agile BA, but But what do you think about that?
Oh, I mean, Susan, when we talk about this all the time. So it's such a big topic, and we don't want to spend 2 hours on that. Um, I mean, obviously you should know whatever software, whatever agile methodology tool you're using, I mean, in the sense of like what, whether it's Jira or DevOps or whatever. But as somebody once said to me, like, if you're, remember, Agile, a lot of this stuff started, you can do it without tools. You can just write Post-it notes.
That's
Or
right.
not Post-it notes, but index cards. And on the front is the story, and on the back is the ACs. And that was one of the ways this got done, and people move things along walls. So remembering your Agile tools is one thing, but then your BA tools is another. As we're going to talk about next week, context diagrams, I think, are a big deal. And knowing how to have a good user story format, I hate to sound self-serving there. It is just, it's necessary, because the purpose of a user story is about the recipient, right? The developer who's going to build that thing needs to get it. It has to be fit for use for them. So you need to speak in a way that a developer can pick up this thing and easily work with it. You want to take all the confusion out of the thing first. So how do you get to there? A lot of it is the classic, what we think of as classic, typical BA tools, right? Personally, obviously, process diagrams help a lot. People process tools. Sometimes you want to get into SIPOC, like input, output, governance, things like that matter. I find those matter a lot. I think, I mean, in my case, I'm a fan of two more major things. I'm a fan of fact modeling, kind of describing in business terms the stuff we work with, so that we can always speak in a business-centric way as much as possible. Even when I'm doing a project where it's all just endpoints, we're not actually having any human user interface, it's all APIs, I still like to have the business point of the thing. Why does anybody even need that information? What will they do with it? So fact modeling helps you with that. And then relatedly, of course, is entity relationship diagrams. So you get some cardinality and a lot of those things, because as soon as you start dealing with data, and usually we wind up dealing with that, at least in my world, you want to be able to talk about the things in the world that matter and use a common language, right? How often do we deal with overloaded terms like customer or valuable, or my favorite one in our regular line of work, done? That's why you've got to get a definition of done. As soon as they say, oh yeah, that'll be done Thursday, I'm like, done, what does that mean? What is done? Because I heard the QA person say it, I've heard the client say it, I've heard the developer say it, and none of you meant the same thing.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So those are some of the tools. I think analysis planning winds up being the last one I really want to talk about. And this is the thing I'll say, and then I'll stop, because I know Scott probably has a lot of opinions on this as well. And I know you do when we talk. One of the biggest tools you have to have in an agile world is, as a BA, is an analysis planning perspective. You have to be able to think through your approach, communicate it, talk about what you're prioritizing to, talk about what you're optimizing to. Because the top challenge, I think, and this is for BA managers also, they look at a project and they're used to saying, well, we have to analyze all this stuff so that we can then write it into sprints. But that never works. Excuse me, in strongly agile cases, that doesn't work, because we're saying, well, I got a sprint starting in 3 weeks. So you got to have a backlog of at least 2 weeks worth of development work ready for me in 3 weeks. And then people start pulling their hair out saying, well, how can I get this all analyzed by then? And the answer is, you're not going to. Of course, you're not going to. You're going to look at the spectrum of things you have to do, pick a couple of important things that you think you can bite off easily, and analyze those in that 3 weeks to start building your backlog. You're going to analyze those to a sufficient depth that you could give it to a developer to work on. And once you've done that, what happens? You get your next 2 weeks. So you're biting this off in small chunks. And as they say, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. But you got to have a strategy for which bite you're doing in alignment with customer value, priority of the project, and other things that other people are bringing to the table. Like, are we trying to retire risks quickly? Are we trying to earn value fastest? Are we trying to drive a product forward as far as possible immediately? So we're going to do the low risk, easy things that are really customer valuable to earn value quickly, and then we're going to do risky things later when we've already earned some value. Or are we doing risk first, because without those things being overcome, there's no value after it? We got to do the risky things. If we can't do those, the rest of this didn't matter anyway. And all that is specific to your projects. You have to think it through and be able to say, these are the little pieces I'm going to break off and work on.
Okay, that's some great advice, Ryland. We do have more questions coming through, and as I said earlier, please keep your questions coming. We'll get to them. So we've got a few more here. The next one is one I'm really interested to hear your answer on too. Is there a need for a dedicated BA when we have a product owner?
Oh, yeah. Yes, I think so. So here's the thing, and I kind of went over this again in the recording that Susan referenced. You can get a bigger discussion on this topic. So the BA, here's the thing, when, Agile likes to say that product owner has all of the skills necessary to represent the business to the development team and do all the analysis necessary to be successful at that. And I think that exists, but it is relatively rare and it's very hard to get at any quantity. Okay. I mean, if you're in a startup and you've handpicked the team and you're only hiring a handful of people to do the work, or possibly they're invested themselves, right? They're investing their time, then, you have highly motivated, highly skilled people who are really all about it and doing that. But if you go out and you say, I need 8 product managers and 8 business analysts, you're not getting that. You're not getting that level of experience and skill, because a lot of those people want to work for themselves. You're not going to get them to come into a company. This is not bad. This is just acknowledging there's a lot of different ways to do the work. So I think if you're dealing with a company, a conventional company of any size, of any substantial size, you have an IT department of 50 to 50 and up. Let's just go 50 and up even, of development side stuff, not operations, but development side. You've got product managers who really know the products and want to drive them forward and be successful with those things, but they may not be strong analysts, right? They may have a product vision and drive it forward and be about revenue and how do we manage costs and how do we serve the customer, but they may not be good at saying, here's how I have to break those things into user stories, like that elephant thing I was saying earlier. That might or might not be their skill. So by taking a BA who is core competency, these are the things we do, right? We write things for other people to make use of. That's the thing, right? We create a vision, a model of the world in documents that other people can then build real world things from, right? That's our core competency. So by pairing us up with somebody who's got that has the vision of the castle in the clouds, we can either bring the castle down to the ground or we can build a scaffolding up to it with the work we do. So it's a good pairing. That's how I see that. It's why those two skills really go together. And then the other thing the key differentiator between those two roles is this, and I've had to talk to clients more than once about this when we've done an Agile transformation. Someone has the authority to commit the team to action. In Agile Scrum, we call that the product owner. Okay, the product owner is the only person with the right to commit the team to work on a thing. If you're telling me the BA has that authority, that's fine. But here's the test I usually apply. So if the product manager wants a certain thing and the BA says, nah, I don't agree with you, we're going to do this, or we don't have bandwidth to do that, and the answer is, well, then that's the answer, then they actually have the authority and that's good. And if not, then, and if that person can say, no, you're not, you're going to do what I want, well, then the BA doesn't have the authority, and you have to acknowledge that so that these two people can work together successfully and do the right thing for the business, because someone is ultimately accountable for those things, right? Yeah. And that follows the authority. So product owners have authority and BAs borrow it or use it on their behalf or proxy it, is usually how I see that. That's my view. There are other views that are also valid, but that's how I tend to see it.
So from a resourcing perspective, could you have a BA working on multiple different projects? So they're not dedicated to that one, but they work on several because you do have that product owner?
It depends. It depends on how much work there is there. For example, I've been on teams where, or situations where the product is very complicated, or there's a lot of forming of ideas, right? Nobody's sure, they know what they want the outcome to be, but they're not really sure of exactly how it should look. Like the business goal is clear, but we have to do a lot of work to figure out what we're going to say to the developer to actually construct. Well, that's a huge investment of time for the BA, right? To really work through that with possibly a UX designer and all the other people who have to be involved. Maybe there's external partners. That always stretches your timeline, right? You have partner companies you're working with across things, especially if time zones become involved. I've worked with one group where they had a group in Australia. They were in the Eastern time zone, US. They had a major vendor in Australia. Successful relationship. They just had to watch their communications and make sure they knew I'm going to need to let extra time for those things when I work with that team, because a lot of our communications are through email. It's just hard to get face-to-face electronic time.
Yeah.
So, and on other cases, it's been really simple and it's more of a steady state thing. There's rarely any new work to be done. There's not minor increments going on, in which case, sure, the BA can handle more than one thing. I've typically found that if you think you need a BA, you probably need one, more or less 1-to-1 for a team, for a Scrum team. If your Scrum team is standard size 7 plus or minus 2, right? The 2 pizza rule, 7 people plus or minus 2 people. You probably have one business analyst to keep those group of developers busy if they are just doing new product development. From there, it gets complicated.
Okay, that's great. And
So
Susan, there's a question here I want to ask you. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, and I was actually probably, this is the next question, but I am, as Ryland is answering that, here are the 2 takeaways that I have. Because again, I'm always about these Agile myths, right? Because one of those Agile myths is there's no documentation, there's no requirements in Agile. Ugh.
Yeah, no.
And that is so far from the truth. A user story is not a requirement. It's really a placeholder for a conversation. But the other thing that I'm taking away is there is absolutely a place for analysis skills in Agile teams. So Agile analysis is not a separate entity into itself. It is based on, you know, good core business analysis skills, knowing the tools and techniques of the trade. Agile is really just the way that you're applying them.
Yeah.
That's my takeaway. Now, but on this topic, here's the next question, which I think is kind of interesting. So should an Agile BA get Agile Analysis Certified, our AAC, or should they be CBAP certified, our Business Analysis Professional Certification, or should they have both? And you've had a hand in AAC.
I did. I wrote,
Yeah.
I authored some of the questions.
That's right. And you were a contributor on the Agile Analysis. Oh, hey, look what I got. I was just in Canada. Oh, you can't see this here.
Is that that's the AEV2 Agile Extension?
Yeah, that's the Agile extension. I have a real life. There you go, a real life hard copy.
Yeah, no, that was a lot of fun. And it was a real privilege to be asked back to help author some of the questions for that test. And I wouldn't recognize them now at all because they go through so many processing layers, which is great. Like we write them, but then you know how it is, right? You never approve your own work, world, right? Even at this level, you never approve your own work. I'm writing a question, I'm proposing answers and distractors, and somebody else is going to look at that and say, no, I don't think that's going to work that well, you know, and refine it and test it. So that was a thing. But I feel like I lost the question you were asking.
Well, that's okay. So what do you think about certifications? So this question was specifically about the IIBA, Agile, and also I'll just throw into the mix because we've also added the product ownership analysis certification as well. What do you think about Agile BAs having certifications? Yes, no, which ones?
Yeah, no, I'll tell you that, and I'll tell you what I tell people when I coach them, and otherwise in you know, career workshops and stuff we do. And I still want to come back to the other question about, hey, what's this thing about documentation and Agile? I might have a thing to throw into the chat, which I just want to have people to have. It's a good thing. But back to certifications. The answer is yes, and not yes, but yes, and okay. Having the certification by itself will never get you the job. Please be aware of that. However, it represents solid learning. And I can genuinely say, because the CBAP was one of the harder tests I've taken, and it was way harder than the PMI, PMP, way harder, okay? I now have the language through the learning of studying to pass the test, a language to talk about business analysis in which is worlds and different above people who don't have it. And I don't mean that just for me, I mean it for anybody. Like when I say to somebody, so tell me what your elicitation techniques are. Or tell me what your favorite stakeholder management technique is. Or what will you do to overcome the following kinds of objections or barriers? And I'm looking for techniques. I'm looking for what they know and how they can explain that they know. Because as a manager once said to me, look, as BAs, we got to be more than smart people going into a room and asking questions. We have to have a toolkit. And studying to pass the tests proves that you have acquired the toolkit and you can explain the tools, right? So what I say to folks when I coach them or when I do career workshops is go and get the certification. It definitely helps the resume, and there are enough jobs out there that say must be CBAP certified or must AAC preferred or PMI certification required, whatever the certification is that's relevant for your universe, definitely go get them. And more is not bad. At the same time, be prepared for the following question, because I'll ask it if I need you. What'd you learn? What do you do differently now that you've done that you didn't do before you passed that test or studied for that test? Because there are one or two certifications out there, and I'm not going to name them, though we all know what they are, that I like to joke, you could fog a mirror and pass that test. I mean, you didn't have to take the class to pass that test. It's just general knowledge that you could do it. It isn't even a complicated set of questions. And at that point, I'm like, okay, I'm glad you took the class. I'm glad they gave you a certification, a little certificate for passing it. That's fine. What'd you learn? Because you could have gotten, the fact that that test was really easy doesn't mean you didn't learn a lot in the class. It just means the test is designed to be, more or less a simple test, right? So I still want to know, having a good answer prepared for that is real, that you can show where you've made a difference in your work through those things, is really, really valuable.
I think that's a great answer, Scott. I'm going to let you add to that because I know you're a CBAP. What do you think about that? And also kind of as a hiring manager.
Yeah, so I agree with Ryland in terms of that CBAP certification is basically, you understand the industry, you understand the profession, you can speak the language, you can explain it, it's basically, I would say, the gold standard in terms of being a business analysis professional. When I look at the specializations such as the Agile or the product owner, I look at these as an extension of deeper knowledge in those particular areas. And to Ryan's point earlier, you do learn from studying for these things. I learned from my CBAP about traceability. I learned from doing the business data analytics around some data analytics concepts I wasn't aware of. So they are good on a resume, but I agree with you, Ryland. More important part is what you're learning from them, and you will learn stuff from them.
Yeah, it's extremely important stuff.
I'll add a final thought because I actually have the AAC and I am also a BA certified through a different organization. But I would say that having the AAC alone would not be helpful. I really do think you still have to have that good foundation in business analysis skills and techniques. That part of your job does not go away if you are working in an Agile organization or a waterfall or a hybrid. You still need to know those. I think the AAC, it just adds on, how do you modify some of those things? What is your role on an Agile team versus doing it differently? All right, we ready for the next question, or do you have one more thought?
I had two things. One, I did want to ask if you could share the link in the PDF to the class I'm teaching in a couple of weeks.
That's right. Why don't you talk about it? Because you are, by the way, you've also written a book on Agile business analysis.
Yeah, I think that'll still show because I don't have
that.
Yeah, this is out there on Amazon. People know about that. And there's a career book also. It's on Amazon.
That's right.
I'm teaching a class. It's a 3-hour class in a few weeks on user stories. It's a deep dive on user stories, decomposition, how to write the kind of thing I was talking about, because people ask me about it all the time. And we're going to do a deep dive on that for about 3 hours, 6 to 9 Eastern time on, I think it's April 25th. I don't remember the date in my head because there's a lot of different dates in my life. But Susan, if she'll do me the favor, is going to put the PDF and the link to register for that into the chat. And if you're interested, take a look at that and register. You can register as an individual, or if you want to bring a work group, there's a group ticket thing I just figured out how to do. So that's a discount thing if you're bringing a group of 5 or more. So please feel free to register for that. It'll be online and people will be able to do the recordings after. And I'm going to give you my best practices, real world stuff. Like, this is what I do. When I finish here today, I'm going back and I'm doing that this afternoon. I have a bunch of user stories due to a client this afternoon, so we can start prioritization. So I'll be talking about that.
And I also want to talk about, since we're talking about all the places you'll be, next Wednesday, 12 o'clock Eastern, you're going to talk about context diagrams. That was a tool that you mentioned just a little bit ago, but you're going to come and talk about that to our members. And so we will also make sure that we point people to that, because I think there's a lot of interest based on the number of registrations on that.
Yeah. So folks, if you're out there and you want to follow either of those things too, feel free to go ahead and, connect with me on LinkedIn or follow me on Eventbrite. Those are good ways so that we'll know different things I'm doing if they become interesting to you later on. And let me give you this one. I know we're possibly running over a moment or two. I don't know how okay that is. Let me put this in the chat. People ask this about documentation in Agile, and it's such an important topic. I'm posting this in. I think I'm doing this so that everyone can see it. I hope I'm doing that right. I'm just going to hit enter, and then I'm going to read this a little. One of the more powerful things I learned from somebody, and it was at a conference, was, I just wish I could remember who it was who said this first, to take your Agile values, and everybody knows those, I'm not going to read them to you, and invert them as a question, right? We know that we value working software over the documentation, right? The software is more valuable than the documentation, right? We didn't set out to just create documentation and be happy and stop, right? We wanted the software, right? Kind of like budgeting for your vacation. The point isn't the budget. The point is to take the vacation, right?
That's right.
So that begs us to ask these questions. I'm just going to read these out because I want you to think about it. That's everybody on the call, especially if you're a manager or if you're related to Scrum or any Agile principles, okay? Any Agile implementation. What is just enough tools and processes to enable powerful individuals and interactions? Okay, because we're not saying we don't need any, but what is just enough process, right? To let us have a way we know we're working together and we're not a bunch of, pee-wee soccer players on the field, right? There are times we mob and scrum things, but that's not the same thing as having no structure. What's just enough documentation to enable and to create valuable working software, right? What is, we do need some, what is just enough to build the software? And that answer will be different in different places. If you're a regulated industry or a medical facility versus a startup that doesn't have either of those things going on, you just want to make some software, you can just, then the documentation you need is different, right? What is just enough contract negotiation to enable us to collaborate? That's a big deal in consulting because you got to have an SOW, but you don't want it to be so locked up if you're doing Agile work that you can't collaborate and shift and adapt. So what is just enough contracted container for us to be successful at working together? And then last, what is just enough planning to enable us to react to change and respond well to change, right? No planning leaves you with the whims of chance, right? Too much planning makes you feel like you're wasting the effort on the planning or you have to follow the plan because you made one. What's just enough planning? Like that vacation again, right? I was talking to somebody about this yesterday. If you're going overseas from the US, if I were taking a trip to Italy, there are certain things I would have to book ahead if I wanted to see them, certain museums, exhibits. You have to get those tickets 3 months ahead if you're going to get them. But I don't have to figure out where I'm having lunch every day. I can do that on the fly. There is last responsible moment. There is just enough planning, okay? This again is a big topic. We could go on for a while about it. I just kind of wanted to share those concepts because I think that answers this. There's no documentation in Agile. Yes, there is. But our view of documentation is what is just enough to do the thing we want to do. And that point will vary based on what it is we're trying to do in the world we operate in. And I'll stop there. I know we're running out of time.
No, I think that's a great point, and it's a great way to describe. There is still documentation. It is negotiable. You want to be transparent. You want to have the conversations about it. It's not necessarily one of these where you're just going to take a template off the shelf and just fill it out. The idea behind Agile is and always has been about having conversations, about being transparent, about doing the things that are going to make a difference, and that's it. In your words, just enough. And I think that sometimes get lost. It gets lost in all of the ceremonies and all of the shenanigans and other things that happen because somebody took a class over the weekend and they don't realize it's about the principles. It's not about the ceremonies. So
Yeah,
I'm off my soapbox.
No, yeah, but one of the great user experience designers I worked with always said to me, look, the document is the product of the process. It captures all the work you did, all the thinking you did, so it retains. It's not the point of having the document. I could write like a fifth grader on a thing and call that a document, but that isn't the point. The point is all the work that went into creating this piece of information. The document captures the work and value. The fact that I just have one that's got stuff on it isn't the point. The point is that it's the right thing. So,
yeah, that's right.
All right. I know we're all passionate about this. We've gone a few over, and I know that's a sensitive thing.
Well, Scott, do we want to take any more questions, or do we want to maybe save those and have Ryland come back later?
Well, I'm just going to choose one here because
Okay.
it leads into what we're doing in 2 weeks from now. It says the question to the hiring manager: why do HR request basically all knowledge that you should have but you shouldn't expect a BA to have everything. So why do they ask for hiring requirements? Essentially, HR is looking for everything that you possibly could have. Why do they put that in a job ad? And I think the way I would answer that as a hiring manager, I'm looking for someone who's going to hit as many of those marks as possible. And the people that are doing the interviews up front, the pre-screening, are basically filtering through. So our topic in 2 weeks when we're doing our next LinkedIn Live is building your career reputation. So we're going to talk about that, digging in a little bit about it. But in terms of how do you get from that resume stage to getting an interview, it's making sure you've got as many of those as possible. And as we talked about earlier, certification will certainly give you a leg up on the competition on that. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, and we'll leave another one right here for you to help you in your business analysis career. If you haven't subscribed to the IIBA YouTube channel yet, you can click over here and click on the bell icon to get notified every time we publish a brand new video.